Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here and to be interviewed on this very special occasion of the Q Google event. I want to thank all these people who have helped me, um, specifically Mike Laurent, Steve Hargadon, Lucy, and it's been a real exciting experience.
Well, welcome, Esther. Thank you so much for saying yes.
I am thrilled to have this opportunity.
So you are the capstone keynote. You are the very last thing that we're doing for this whole crazy weekend of events this year, or this weekend rather. And we're really thrilled that you said yes and that you could spend some time with us. Just so everybody knows, I'm Mike Lawrence, the CEO of Q that Esther just mentioned, and I'll be interviewing Esther. We have a little bit of a shared history, but we thought it would be helpful and appropriate to sort of make this a conversation. But we also have, because Esther is an overachiever, some wonderful slides that she's prepared that she will reference. And the master of those slides is none other than Steve Hargadon, who will be jumping in and assisting. There he is. There's Steve. So thank you, Steve, for your willingness to jump in and assist. So as we go through the questions and as things pop up, Esther will reference those slides, and we'll just make sure that everybody in the audience can see them. Another quick tidbit here, we've got a Q&A module built into this Hangout on Air, and by now I think you are all familiar with it. If you've got questions, comments, kudos, anything you'd like to share, feel free to hit submit a question, and then it'll show up in this column over on the right. So I can see Lucy saying hello, and I can see Arlette saying that she had a great day. Peggy George is also commenting, and Allison is commenting from Walnut Creek, right? Allison, you're in Walnut Creek. And also, I wanted to share that we had a total of 291 attendees all weekend, or registrants, I should say. And I think we had somewhere around 14 countries and 40 states and 5 Canadian provinces. So some amazing statistics for the first ever online summit featuring Google for Education that Q and Learning Revolution have put together. And I also wanted to thank Steve and Lucy. It was a brainstorm discussion that we had back, I think, in April. That ultimately resulted in this event and this craziness, and I want to thank you guys for the amazing amount of work that you put in to make all this possible. So without further ado, then we'll jump in and we'll begin here. So Esther Wojcicki, who's already introduced herself, is a teacher at Palo Alto High School. She's been teaching journalism and English at Palo Alto High for the last 30 years. She's been the driving force behind the development of its award-winning journalism program, which is now the largest in the U.S. with 600 students, 5 teachers, and a new 25,000 square foot media arts center, which was just opened. She's also the vice chair of Creative Commons Board of Directors. And if you haven't looked at Creative Commons, I highly recommend it. It's an amazing nonprofit that supports the idea of sharing creative things that are created. And instead of assuming all rights reserved, it assumes that some rights are reserved, and it supports the idea of sharing and collaboration and mixing and remixing. So I'm a big fan in any case. She's also a distinguished scholar at Media X at Stanford and on the advisory board of Think, Amsterdam School of Creative Leadership, and a leader in the intersection of education and technology for years. So I want to take us back to 2006, Esther, when you called me up on the phone. And you said that Google was conducting a series of focus groups across the country, and you heard about this organization, Q, from a colleague, and thought that we might have some educators that we could send to the focus group. So tell us, at that time, did you have any idea just how big Google for Education and all the things that Google does in education would become at that time? And tell us a little bit about the genesis of some of the projects that have launched.
So when I called you at that time, I had no idea that it was going to be as big as it is today. However, I have always traditionally thought big. And so that was one of the things that, I was hoping for. I mean, I originally came to Google that year, and I was brought into Google for another project, which actually failed. And so what I was doing is looking around the company to see what other things I might be able to do. And I just happened to be paired up with Kristen Fridella. So if you could show that slide of me and Kristen, this is at the very beginning. I was the teacher in the classroom, actually just with a part-time job at Google, and Kristen was, of course, the one taking the reins of everything. She was the enterprise person. And so the question is like, how can we make Google and their tools available to teachers? Being a teacher, of course, I had quite a few very strong ideas. And I thought, well, some of the things that we could do is take what Google already had available and just write lesson plans for those and then hopefully show teachers how to use them. So if you go to the next slide, you can see what I originally started with. And I just picked those tools. And that just happened to be actually, as you see, it's pretty different from today. So we had Docs, spreadsheets, calendar, Gmail, iGoogle, Books, and Earth. So some of them still are here. Docs. Actually, Docs was called Rightly at that point, and we changed it. And so this is what I thought teachers could probably use these. I mean, it would make their lives better, me being a teacher. I thought that would help me in my classroom. And so what Kristen suggested is that, gee, maybe we should get some other teachers to see what they think of these ideas of yours. Just one teacher is not enough. And so that's when I called you, Mike. You were part of the first group at Google. You were part of the group of educators who were recommended that I pulled together. And then I pulled together another group in Chicago and the third group in New York. There were 3 total groups. And so I got feedback from all of those. One of the other people that I contacted, of course, was Lucy. Lucy Gray. She was a real superstar here. And
Still is.
and it was, those groups were really exciting, and the teachers were great, and they were all really excited about doing some of the things that I suggested, and they came up with more ideas and all kinds of activities. And then, of course, the idea came up that we should start a Google Teacher Academy, a place where teachers could come together, talk about these things, not just in a small little groups like we were doing there, but where they could come together, come up with ideas, get some training, and then share it with other teachers. And so that was the beginning of the Google Teacher Academy, and that was the beginning of the whole Google for Education.
Now, I have a little artifact that I've saved since that day, the very first Google Teacher Academy in November of 2006 that West Ed and Q produced on behalf of Google. And it's the only time they gave these backpacks out. And I can tell you just how many people are so jealous and want this awesome bag, and we just haven't been able to pass it out at the future DTAs and all the ones since then.
I know, it's really kind of sad because I use it all the time because I love it. It's a great backpack. But maybe again, you never know. So,
yeah, we had Kristen and then Dana and now Becky, and now we sort of feel like, well, it's kind of an interesting thing. Maybe we shouldn't do bags anymore. So, well, great. Well, I want to move us to the next question here. There's certainly more to tell, of course, but I'm sure it'll pop up. But you're a celebrated journalism teacher, perhaps the most such celebrated journalism teacher in the country, and still in the classroom. How do you leverage Google tools in your program? So how do you use them professionally as a teacher? Certainly, we've talked a lot about how all these other teachers can, and we help produce these events for them. But you've got a classroom full of students, every day, and you run that program. So could you speak a little bit about that?
Well, so one of the main things that I used, if we could get to the next slide, one of the main things that I use is Google Docs, and then Chromebooks. So it gives so every kid can have a computer, and so it's like a one-to-one. And so one of actually, maybe if we can skip to some of the other slides here. Maybe can we go through, Steve, quickly in all these? One of these Chromebooks for education is really important, and this tablets with Google Play for education. That's also a totally new thing that we have today that was not there when I first started. Also, part of my program one of the things that I do use also is YouTube, and that's with a video production program where the kids upload their videos to YouTube. And one more thing I wanted to mention while I'm here is this new education blog. Google has a for education blog. So if we can skip then to um, slide number 10. You can see this program that Mike was referring to. This is the beginning slide for the Palo journalism program. And I think one of the things that's I'd like to mention, and that's important, is that what we're doing there is we are using Google input, basically docs and spreadsheets and all the tools that I originally mentioned. And those are support for the students to be independent learners. And this is the website that the kids have put up. This was just put up like last week, and it's updated every day. And this is the student newspaper. It's slide number 11. It has a website and also has the newspaper that you can see as well at slide 12. And so I'm using all these Google tools as input devices and ways to give students some freedom in the classroom, sort of the blended learning approach, so that I don't really lecture, I just basically coach and support them. And then I use the tools to empower them. I don't know, hopefully does that make sense to you, what I just said here, and to everybody else too. So that is the main thing. I also use Dan Russell. I don't know if you know about his search curriculum. So I use that. Kids learn to search first, then they learn to they do all the writing on docs, they collaborate on docs, then they put all these stories that they write that you can see on there. Those are all peer edited. I also edit them, but for the most part, by the time I get to them, they're already done. Because the kids are very, very proactive. They all try to beat the previous year's staff and get more awards. Can't believe how many more awards you can get, but they're still on the path to getting more awards. And so that works for me. And so that's just one way that the tools have worked. I also guess I'd like to go to see what students will come up with on their own. This is a magazine that the kids created because my class was too big, and they basically said they wanted to create their own magazine. And I said, well, okay. And so this was the magazine that they came up with, and it comes out with the newspaper. But I think the Google tools give kids a lot of freedom and a lot of responsibility at the same time because basically it's published. So they have people that can see what they've been writing and what they've been doing.
That's hugely powerful.
I don't think I'm on the right slide. Which slide is the magazine?
Magazine is number 15. Oh, wait just a minute. Number 13.
So two back. So it is truly powerful. And that's a beautiful looking magazine there. If that's the cover.
That's the cover. And then the thing that's kind of, so there's another magazine that we have that is sports magazine. I started the sports magazine in 2007. And the goal for that was, how can we get all those guys that love sports and hate writing to write? And so the answer was, have them write about sports. And it turned out to work really well. And here's an example of the sports magazine.
That's the next slide there, Steve. 15, I think. Or 14. 14.
It's 15. No, it's 14. Right. So it's the Viking Year in Review. And you can see that this is all done by kids who love sports. And we have a large percentage of the football team, for example, learning to write using this. And then if you go to the next slide, number 15, you'll see that they also produce a website. And that's updated every day. So they're learning technical skills at the same time, as well as writing skills. And if we go to the next slide, we also have television. So if the kids don't want to do any of the previously mentioned writing styles, they can do television. We have a TV network that is broadcast every single day. And then, of course, uploaded onto the web so that you can see it at any time. So this just gives you an example of the kind of things that that kids can. And if you go to 17, you'll see, for example, this is what the kids use spreadsheets for. So they've come up with, this is the stories that are going to be published on the 19th of September this year. And this is the story assignments. They do it all. So they do the story, the writer, the photographer, and then the person, the editor that's in charge. And so they're using spreadsheets to do all this organization. I mean, I oversee it, but they do it.
Wait, so they already know about the new iPhone 6? They already got the scoop there on that?
They already are getting the scoop on the iPhone 6. I'm not kidding. One of the kids there, I don't know, a parent or something can get in and tell you what the new iPhone 6 is. I have no idea. Yeah,
Wow.
I don't know.
All right, I'm going to show up in your class on Monday then so I can get the scoop a day before it's announced.
Right, it's true. So, I mean, and then you can see they're all their ideas. Of course, sometimes I have to come in and change their ideas, but very rarely, actually. They're really good.
Now, do you ever have to come in on ethical matters of issues of, hey, you need more sources on this, or this seems a little flimsy, or how do you handle that sort of thing? If it's mostly peer edited and then comes to you at a fairly final stage, how often do you have to wade in on those weighty issues?
Well, that's actually a great question. I teach that in the beginning journalism program. I spend a lot of time on the ethics and legality and making sure that we don't get sued and that they don't get sued and that I don't get sued, and that we don't do anything that's unethical. So they have to have at least 2 or 3 sources on every single story. And then with regard to like what's ethical, that's actually really a tough question. Like, for example, last spring they wrote about date rape, and that was a very hot story. It spread all over the country. So the question is, should they be allowed to write about these kinds of things? And I guess my answer on that is that this is their publication. This is important to them. If they do a well-researched, accurate job of writing about these things, they should definitely be able to do it. So I'm very, I favor the First Amendment for students, that they also have the same rights and responsibilities as the professional press. So I let them do that, but they do need to know all the ethics. So I go through the Society for Professional Journalist Ethics with them very carefully at the beginning of the first introductory course to journalism. And then I also go through it again in advanced journalism. I remind them constantly, no, that this is a serious business and they can't just do things that are, frivolous or that give the paper a bad reputation.
Yeah, and also the ethical issues of what to cover. Is this, tantalizing story worthy of, the newspaper or not? I mean, should we cover, this story or that story? I mean, that's also a tough choice too.
It's a very tough choice. So the most important thing that they go through is the story ideas. Like, come up, and they do come up with some really wacky story ideas. And for the most part, I just let that sit on the board when it first appears and don't say much of anything. And then I watch the process that the kids are going through to try to sift through all the ideas and come up with the ones they're actually going to use in their stories. And for the most part, I would say 95% of the time, I do not have to spin. That they come to that they have common sense, and at some point they are able to reason through the whole thing and decide it's not a good idea. But it's hard because as a teacher, you just have to hold your tongue and not say anything. And most teachers get like really worried about this. But and I think you have, as a teacher, you have the right to pull the stories at any stage. I just wait. I don't do it right away. And they learn a lot from that process.
Well, and it sounds like you're doing the right thing by building a process by which they learn the basics and the ethics very early on in the first level, and then they learn more as they grow up towards the point where they would be making some of those story decisions and possibly as an editor making those decisions. So you're building it in, you're baking it in so that by the time they get there, it doesn't have to be a brand new discussion.
The other thing that's important is, it's their peers are telling them these things. So on Friday, for example, they had the most amazing discussion, editorial discussion about what was controversial in the school. And I really didn't have to say anything because the editors themselves, these are seniors who've been with me for 3 years, pretty much mirrored what I would have said, only I didn't have to say it. So coming from their peers is really different. And then they come to a consensus, and they came up with some great editorial ideas, and I didn't have to do much of anything besides just
Yep.
listen.
And our fabulous viewers are actually answering their own questions here, thanks to Lucy and some others here. So someone asked where they could find your school's publications, and so Lucy has shared a URL there that I've promoted to the top here, so you can see it. It's pali.net/student/publications, and that has, I think, all of the ones we're talking about: the Pali Voice, the Campanile, a number of the different publications that you've referenced already.
That's right. So also the question is, how do I connect with my students when I need to, which is frequently actually. So, unfortunately, I'm not able to use Google Classroom because in order to use Google Classroom, you have to have the district IT people have to enable it. And so my district at the moment is, they've had a change in IT personnel, so they have not enabled Classroom yet. So the question is, how do I do it? And if you go to slide 18, you'll see I do Google Groups. I still do that. And so I send out messages to them all the time, Google Groups, and you can actually see this is my Google Groups. And these are all the different messages I have sent out. They also send out, the editors will send out messages as well. So there's one that's right here. Grace Kim is an editor. And they will start using it more and more as time goes on. So we also use Facebook, but we're a little concerned about the security there. So we use it for sort of frivolous things, but this is the primary method of communication. However, if you do have Classroom and you have the Google Apps for your domain, empowered, you can use that. It's actually an easier way to do it. But this is for teachers who don't have it. There's still ways to be in touch with your kids.
Yep, and that certainly is still a significant number of educators, despite the massive growth of Google Apps for Education in the last few years. So we've already stepped into this realm a little bit, but let me just restate or reshape this next question here. Where do you see journalism education going in the future? And you touched on it a little bit, but if we haven't hit all of it, maybe share your thoughts on that.
So here, if we could go to slide number 19. So this is what kids learn in journalism. They learn all the 21st century skills: collaboration, technology skills, communication, written and oral, creativity, critical thinking, nonfiction reading and writing. It's all part of the Common Core State Standards. It's all the kinds of things that employers want. They want kids that can think for themselves, that have experience collaborating and know a lot about technology. So I think that journalism and media arts really are the curriculum for the 21st century. It's the way to teach all the skills that we've been trying to teach. Paying attention in the world. They write about things in all over the world, international news. I mean, you're always asking, well, are the kids reading newspapers? Are they paying attention to what's going on? Well, if they're in a publication, I'll tell you, they read the newspaper all the time, and you don't have to tell them. And then regarding collaboration, I don't step in and tell them what to do all the time. I mean, I put them in a group and, okay, you're all on page 1 and you're page 2 and page whatever. We publish 24 pages. They have to work together on this whole thing. And that's ads, and that's also writing and photography and everything coming together. It works. It's very effective. And also, it's super popular. So, it started in 1984. I first came with 19 kids. And today there's over 600 kids in this brand new building that the Palo Alto School District, they raised a bond, and then also we got some money from the state, and then there were also some donations for some of this computer stuff inside. But I really think that journalism really is. If you go to slide 20, this is what I said: journalism, media arts is the curriculum for the 21st century. And if you go to slide 21, you see the exterior of the building. and you're welcome to come, by the way. And we're going to have we have tours of the building, and inside, if you take a look at slide 22, you'll see the inside of the building. So that interior area is full of bean bags and cubes and things like that. So it gives kids an opportunity to collaborate. It's just a really collaborative space, and they don't want to leave, by the way. They want to stay all the time, like all 7 periods, but that's not allowed.
That's a good problem to have. You're doing something right. It's been fun to talk to you about that. I actually, when I was teaching, I used to have my students create a paper, and we used like old school tools, like to slice things up and paste them down, and then run them off. And it came from my experience running a college newspaper. I was editor-in-chief of the newspaper at UC Santa Barbara by the time I graduated, and it was a powerful learning experience for me, even at that age, and it sticks with me throughout. So it's very, very powerful. The next thought I wanted to throw in there and get your thoughts on is the fact that your family has a unique history with Google as a company, a unique relationship, one might say. Could you describe what that's been like, having a front row seat for the birth of what is now the 3rd largest company on the planet?
It's been a very interesting experience. It's quite a ride. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see my daughter Susan, which is slide 23. And so Susan was employee number 16. And Google started in her garage. If you take a look at slide 24, you'll see the garage. She bought this house, and then she actually bought it just after she got married. And then the question was like, gee, how do we pay the mortgage payment? And I guess she didn't think about that first. And so she thought, well, maybe I'll just rent out the garage. And so she decided to rent the garage. And of course, the story is now old story. She rented the garage to Larry and Sergey. It was a very nice garage. So if you go to slide 25, you'll see the garage. And that was actually at some kind of Google event. It says Google since has purchased this house. And so I can tell you at the very beginning when I first met Larry and Sergey, there was nothing in the house except in her kitchen there was some, a table and so forth. And then in the living room there were like a few, there was a couch and a chair and so forth. But then in the areas that she rented to Larry and Sergey, there were computers everywhere, everywhere. I'm not kidding. They had computers here. You'll see if you go to the next slide. Okay, so this was the living room. It had this lamp in it, by the way. This is slide 26, and they pretty much like lamps like this. But they had food all over the place. Slide 28. This is basically what it looked like in one of the rooms. So they rented the garage, but then they also rented the entire bottom of the house except for the living room and the kitchen and the dining room. So there were computers in the closet. I even went into the bathroom once. There was a computer on the counter. There were wires running back and forth all over the place. I mean, you couldn't even walk on the floor because there were so many wires. You should either walk on the wires or walk next to the wires, which was pretty much impossible. So you had to walk on the wires. So it was, early on, I should say, the question was, what did Susan do? Who did she rent this house to, or this part of this garage to? And but it became clear that what they were doing was something kind of important, because we all sort of got hooked to this Google thing. I don't know if you remember, they used to have yellow pages of the internet. You bought the yellow pages and then you would look through and find the website you wanted, and it was just a joke. And then all of a sudden came along Larry and Sergey with this thing, Google. So Susan got hooked to it, I got hooked to it, a few other people in the family got hooked to it. So, maybe they're doing something right, it's kind of interesting. And they were there, by the way, day and night. They were only supposed to be there during the day, but they never went home.
I think we have a couple more slides of some of what the house looked like.
Yeah, look at page 29, or slide number 29. They put computers in the closets. I mean, they had stuff all over the place. And then if you look at slide 30, this is kind of what they looked like there. You know, there was, and you can see trash all over the floor. They had trash everywhere.
And this is when it was called BackRub, right?
Yes.
The original name of Google's search engine, by the way, just a little trivia fact for the kids at home, is BackRub, because it was looking back, and anyway, it was an awful name, obviously, and they figured out a much better one.
Yeah, but anyway, so it was fun to be there. And you know, Susan joined, I've forgotten, 9 months after she rented the garage to them, and then she became the head of sales. Oh, well, not sales. I guess it was marketing, or she had to try to figure out how to make money. That was her job. She had a PR budget of 0, but she was supposed to spread the word, and she was also supposed to, you know, to go out and do all this PR stuff, and also come up with a plan to make money for Google, and with no budget. So it was very exciting. They were, you know, everybody was optimistic. But I must say it was quite a challenge.
Absolutely. I read an article on her recently that she basically built the most successful online advertising structure in history. It did the job, and it's funded quite a bit. I'll see if I can find the quote here from what I was reading in terms of the accomplishment, but quite amazing.
Yeah, she was. And you know, it somehow never seemed to faze her. She was just, I'm going to do this, no problem, I'll figure it out. And I was always impressed with her attitude. And so then the last slide is a picture of Larry and Sergey about how they used to look. They don't look like that anymore. I don't know if you've seen Sergey recently, but he's got a beard, and it's gray. And Larry's hair is gray too, so I don't know if that tells you something about all the work they're doing. But anyway, but that's how they looked, you know, initially back then when they first started, or somewhat like that.
Well, I'm going to throw an extra question in here, and then we'll go to the questions that have been submitted. We mentioned the fact that you are the vice chair of Creative Commons. And I think I mentioned that I'm a big fan of Creative Commons, its mission, and everything that Professor Lessig was pouring into it when he built it so many years ago. Could you speak to us a little bit about where do you see Creative Commons going in the future? You've got a brand new CEO. You're the vice chair. Is there a future where you'll be the chair? So tell us a little bit about Creative Commons and where you see it going.
So I think Creative Commons is reevaluating what they could do to be the most helpful and to work with what they see now in the tech world. So they think that some of the tools need to be updated, upgraded, maybe possibly working with data and other things like that. We hired a new CEO recently, Ryan Merkley. He's a pretty incredible person, and he's young and dynamic. And I have been vice chair now for a few years. I actually can't remember when I started. I was chair before for 2 years, and now we have Paul Brest, who was the former dean of Stanford Law School, who is the chair at the moment. And Paul and I work together. He actually lives across the street, so it works perfectly. And I think that what I'd like to see is if we could teach students about what Creative Commons is in the classroom. So how to share, how to, and what is a Creative Commons license? And I don't think enough of that is going on in the schools. So most kids don't have any clue about what is a CC licensed work. So,
I agree. I was in a meeting with librarians at the California Department of Education a few years ago. We were putting together the model library standards that we eventually were approved. And I asked the whole room, I said, you know, I scanned through the document of the draft of the standards, and I saw no mention of Creative Commons or anything around alternative methods of copyright. Could we possibly put something in there about that? You know, we've got context, there's resources, and I kid you not, no one in the room understood what I was talking about, and the facilitator actually had to ask me to explain Creative Commons to a room of librarians. And I was shocked. And I love librarians, and by the way, this is nothing against librarians. It was early enough, I think, in the process that it was still spreading. But I think we've come some distance from that time when that happened. But I think there's a lot more room to go. I've had to educate lawyers on Creative Commons. In negotiating documents for Q to sign, I asked if we could do some sort of a Creative Commons license on what we were going to be creating together, and they said, well, what is that? And I have to explain it, and it's just shocking to me that even lawyers are still sort of catching up on it.
So that's one of the main goals I have. Can we spread the word? I've been trying to do this for a while, but I think maybe we'll be able to do it now, because it's not just librarians that don't know about it, it's everybody. It's teachers that don't know about it, students don't know about it. I mean, people all over don't know about it, and I think if we're not going to know about it, how can we use it? And kids constantly are just ripping things off because they don't know that there's an alternative. And there is an alternative, and it's the open web, and they can easily license stuff. Actually, I just posted a link to a chart that will help people decide what is the most useful license for them. What license would work most effectively, and hopefully that I don't know. That's my goal. Is can we spread the word more effectively in the schools?
Yeah. Yeah, and to our part, Q hosts a number of events every year, and this last April we hosted our Leadership 3.0 Symposium that we've done since 2008, and we added a day on the front end of it, all focused on open education resources, and we invited in a number of folks, including Creative Commons, and Cable Green came out and actually presented and talked, and it was great. We were trying to do what we could to spread the word to the administrators that attended that event. But I think maybe there's something in there that could take a page from Google, for instance, like these summits, and somehow create a licensing structure in which Creative Commons could allow others to host Creative Commons specific events or OER events and have Creative Commons featured within it. So maybe something along those lines might be the future that we could do.
That would be great, yeah.
So,
I'd like to see it spread virally somehow. I'm trying to
yeah.
find a system that would enable it to do that.
Well, let's just get Justin Bieber involved, right? And then, no, that's probably not a good idea.
Well, actually, as I was going to mention, how about James Franco, since he was my
Oh, yes! If only we knew someone that used to, I don't know, be his teacher. Is there anyone on this Hangout that used to teach James Franco that might be able to have him help us out in this? Oh, yeah. Wait!
I wonder who that could be. Anyway, yes, I was hoping to engage him in this battle for teaching kids about Creative Commons. That would be great.
That would be great. So yes, so what I'm hinting at is that yes, James Franco, the actor, is a former student of Esther's and still communicates with her. And there's actually a picture of him on the interwebs if you do a search.
Yes, that's true. It's very exciting. He was a great student, and it's great because he still comes back to visit all the time, which I think says a lot about him.
Very good. Yeah, I still try to keep in touch with the number of former students. So let's go ahead and shift gears here and look and see what we've got listed over among the questions. Lucy Gray wants your daughter to keynote next year, so I give a hearty thumbs up to that. And we've got someone here asking about your, I think here, let's see, they'd love to see Creative Commons licenses integrated even more with the Google Research tool.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Sherry, that was Helen McConaughey. Sherry Edwards wanted to share that my students use only Creative Commons and public domain images. We are spreading the word, so kudos to you, Sherry. Way to go.
Right.
Allison Gomez is asking if we have a link to your slides, so I didn't want to presume for you. Just let us know, and if you are comfortable, we'll make that public to the folks to take a look at.
That's great, yes.
Okay. So there's Allison's question. A bunch of folks are talking about the event over this weekend and how much they've learned. Trying to see other ones that popped in. Someone went to one of the Lucy, of course, went to the focus group. You mentioned that. Very good. So I'm trying to find a question here someone had about when you were raising your own children. I'm trying to find that question. I thought I highlighted it, and I may have lost it. Steve, you're actually here, and you do a lot more than just advanced slides. I want to give you an opportunity here to ask a question of Esther, since we've got this amazing time together, and we still have some time. And I'll see if I can find that question that was here.
Esther and I have a long history of deep conversations around learning and freedom and all kinds of things. Um, Esther, and we've talked before about the importance of journalism as sort of as the subject for students. There's been a lot of sort of changes in our view of journalism, and especially in light of the use of the internet for citizen journalism, and then a recent Pew study which actually suggests that we're less likely to disagree with each other because of the lack of anonymity and social consequences. What's sort of the best case scenario for you, or the worst case scenario of how the web is shifting journalism?
Well, so first of all, I guess I would like to say that there's been sort of a national hysteria about the loss of journalism, the death of journalism, because the platform has changed. So we don't have paper as much, so people don't subscribe to newspapers. But on the other hand, I think journalism has exploded because there is citizen journalism, there is Twitter, there's Facebook, there's Google Plus, and plus you can get all the news on the web. So I think the only thing that's really changed is the platform. So now we get our news digitally as opposed to on paper. So I do think this is the 21st century way. However, I do think that there is a change in investigative reporting because newspapers can't afford investigative reporters anymore. So there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Or the lawsuits?
And there's a lot of lawsuits. I do think that there's a lot of mistakes on Twitter and a lot of information that's promoted that's incorrect. I think this Pew study that you mentioned about, people are afraid to dissent because they're afraid of like what might happen to them if they do dissent, and the loss of anonymity, that you can't do anonymous posts anymore at all, or it's pretty hard. I think that's a bit of a problem. There was that one post that I just remember recently about this woman in Florida who wrote something about her preschool child's nursery school and how she didn't like what was going on. And it was on Facebook, and somehow or other it was supposed to be a private post, but it ended up being a public post. And then her kid was removed from the preschool. She couldn't. It was a 4-year-old kid, couldn't go back because of what the mother posted. So, and it wasn't anything terrible. It was just somewhat of a critical post about the way the school was being organized. So I think that was a little bit concerning. And I think there's other things that people are afraid to post what they really think for fear of retribution of some kind. I do think there's a problem. And I'm not sure how to solve that problem. Because on the other hand, you don't want people just saying things that are really nasty about each other without any, ownership. But maybe, I don't know. What are your ideas? I don't know how to go on.
Well, sort of an interesting follow-up to that might be, how do your students respond to some of the questions that come up around bullying behavior on the web? Right, this happened. We often hear it reported specifically as it relates to women in certain fields. But how do your students feel about that? Are they're probably involved in the nuance of it? What kinds of solutions do they talk about when these sort of delicate issues come up?
Well, they are concerned about bullying behavior. We have a whole program in the school to counteract bullying. But that doesn't mean it's gone totally, as you can probably imagine. Um, the girls right now have that C magazine that I showed you that had a picture of a plant on the front. Those girls are worried about sexual discrimination and how they are being bullied into certain types of behaviors, so that because men, I don't want to give away their whole story, but they're concerned about being bullied and I don't think that they have an answer yet. I think there are answers on, on Facebook. Um, if there's any bullying going on Facebook, the school somehow manages to get involved, even though it's off limits. Do you know what I mean? That bullying can take place from a home computer. And so technically the school does not have any right to touch that. But for some reason, I think that they can manage the student in the school. And I guess the whole atmosphere of no bullying and accepting diversity and all that seems to be effective, at least at Palo Alto High School. I can't generalize for other schools because there's a lot of stuff going on everywhere that I can read about and I see everywhere. It's a tough problem, and people can actually tweet about another person and set up accounts that are that aren't really their account, and then create all kinds of problems.
Yeah, but this reminds me, and what gives me hope is that we put these students in rooms with brilliant educators like yourself that can help guide them and help take perhaps wrong turns and turn them into teachable moments. And whenever folks go down that road of filtering and blocking and don't let them go to the bad places, don't let them make those wrong decisions at all, I point them to the highly trained and effective educators like yourself that we have in the classrooms with them that we're not fully utilizing if we're blocking and filtering. So I'm encouraged hearing that you're out there helping guide these kids as they're coming up through high school in your case, because it reminds me of all the other teachers that are doing the same.
Right. I think that is the most effective way to do it, is to guide them, because I think if you block them, and it's going to come out somewhere else. It's kind of like what goes on with all my story ideas. Some really terrible story ideas come out, but then if they work it through, I find that, as I said, I've never seen anything really bad ever come through to the end.
And this actually, go ahead, sorry.
That's because they're working it through with their peers, and instead of being outside in some after school environment, they're actually hanging out there in my class or in that atrium that you saw. And I can sort of like drop little pearls of wisdom every now and then. I don't wait around to lecture, but I just like drop things that might be useful. And then sometimes it works, and actually most of the time it seems to work.
Great. And it links into actually that question I was trying to find. I found it, and it's from Peggy George. She says, I'm wondering how this translates to how Esther raised her children. Did she give them the same kind of autonomy? Seems to me that Esther really knows kids.
So that's a really good question. And the answer is yes, I gave them a ton of autonomy early on. I don't think that the world was as fearful as it is today. We have a problem today because we're all afraid of everything. But for example, when my kids were 5 years old and they were going to kindergarten, I gave them their lunch pail. I put them on the doorstep and told them to walk to school. And in the summers, they were riding their bikes to the local swim club. And I actually had, the older ones taking care of the younger one. I have 3 daughters, and the oldest one, Susan, the one that's the Google girl, she was babysitting for her siblings. Of course, she was downstairs, I was upstairs, but still she was babysitting, whatever. And she felt a sense of responsibility early on. I guess the other thing I did, they don't do it today, I sent all of them to visit their grandmother in Los Angeles on the plane by themselves at age 5. They used to put like little luggage tags around their neck, and then I would just march them to the plane, put them on, and like, see you in a week. And they would do that. But today, of course, you can't do that because, of all the security and things like that. But yes, they did. They had a lot of independence early on, and I pushed them really early on. When my 2 oldest daughters, Susan and Janet, were, Susan was 12, I believe, and Janet was 11. I sent them to Europe by themselves, to one of those international programs. And they were there for 6 weeks. And I had not met the parents. I did not fly with them. They went by themselves. So, the question is, would I do that today? Well, of course, I could not do that today. It's impossible to do it today, right? Because like all the security and everything else, God knows what's going on. So, but I do think there were more opportunities years ago for kids to be more independent early on. And then, of course, that was also true around the house as well. They had to do things around the house. I did not consider myself, the only one that had to clean up. They had to also do the same thing. So I do think that it's important for kids to feel like they're responsible, that they're part of the family and not just being waited on. I mean, today a lot of kids today are in a situation where they're just being waited on constantly, and the waiters are the mom and the dad.
Yeah, helicopter parents.
Helicopter parents, and actually that starts now today when they're first born, because they have this co-sleeping business. The kids sleep with you, and then they don't want to get out of your bed, and then they want, I don't know, Fritos at 11 o'clock at night, and you go out anyway, all that stuff.
Yes, everyone knows that you should eat Fritos after midnight, not before midnight.
Right. So anyway, yes, I hope I answered her question, but yes, I did give them a lot of responsibility early on.
Great, wonderful. Well, we are just past our time, and I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and your memories and your expertise with us this evening. And trying to do it last night too. You get bonus points. So I have a special gift for you. I just want to let you know, in case you didn't know it and the rest of the world didn't know it. I'm going to give you this pin next time I see you. It says, I don't know if you can read it. It says, "I'm kind of a big deal." And then I want you to wear this because not everybody will know just how big of a deal you are, and the pin will remind them of that. And then they can ask you, well, why are you a big deal? And you can share, or just point them to this archive video, and it will explain all of it. So you are an inspiration and a friend and a colleague, and I'm thrilled that you said yes and that we could have this time together with a couple hundred of our closest friends. And thank you for helping us along the way. It's been a great ride since that first phone call and when we met in 2006. And thank you for working through the technical difficulties to share everything with this group. So Steve, any other final words from you, master of the slides?
Hardly, yeah. The slide minion. Mike, thanks so much for this whole event. Esther, thanks for being so patient with us. We are sort of wrapping up, and what a brilliant 2 days it's been. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you all for inviting me and including me, and it's been a pleasure, absolute pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. And just a couple of extra little items. Someone in the chat asked about the Q membership. You are correct. With your paid registration to the event, every attendee gets a 1-year membership to Q. The way it's going to work is tomorrow we'll send out a promo code that you can then use at the Q.org website and log in, put the promo code in, say you want to purchase new membership or renew membership, and then put the promo code in, and that $40 will change to $0. And if you're a current member, it'll extend you out 12 months, and if you're a new member, it'll start tomorrow or whenever you use the code. We just ask that you not share the code because then you wouldn't be able to use it after you shared it. It is a one-time use code. So that is a great question. Thank you for asking it, and thank you, Lucy, for answering it. I just thought I'd share it on the call here. And then also remember that all of the sessions that we had, it was over 60 sessions, are in most cases already been recorded and uploaded to the YouTube channel. And they're available to you as an archive if you're a paid registered attendee, or if you're a presenter or a moderator this weekend and volunteered your time, we give you access to that. There's probably a few that Steve is still compressing and uploading that are going to go live in a few hours, and of course this one will go live. So watch for that. It'll be at giesummit.org for perpetuity. You should be able to log in thanks to your membership in the Google Plus Circle for this event. So if you ever change your Google Plus account, you need to let us know if you want to continue to have access to it. And many folks have asked us a couple of questions, and Steve, just jump in if I'm missing them, but some folks have asked if there is a certificate of participation available for those that have attended the event, and we're going to work on that tomorrow and meet as a team on that question. and I think the answer probably will be yes, and we'll get those out to you soon. They also have asked, hey, this has been great. Do you have a registration that others could sign up for that would give them access to the archive even though they missed the live portion? We're also going to be addressing that question at the debrief, and I think the answer will be yes, and we'll figure out a way to make that available for your colleagues and others in the world that you'd like to share that with. Other just program updates, Steve, before we finally say goodbye to Esther and the attendees?
No, just a huge shout out to Lucy Gray, our co-chair, who's not here in the presenter room, but congrats to everybody.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Esther.
Thank you so much, and thank you. It's just been amazing. What a ride, really.
What a ride.
Would I have ever 2006? Never.
Very exciting. Well, thank you all, and we're going to go ahead and sign off then here, and thank you again, and we will see you at the next event.